The city wakes under a glass sky, its arteries of electricity thrumming like a heart that has learned to forget time. Clock towers rise above the spires, chrome bells gleaming in the pale dawn light. Yet every clock on every street seems to stutter. The hands twitch, hesitate, pause mid-second, then lurch forward as if wrestling with a stubborn memory. People walk with an uncertain gait, half in motion and half in memory, an adolescent jog that refuses to finish. A mother lifting a child toward a doorway that never quite closes, a tram car gliding into a tunnel of frozen rain that refuses to end. On the edge of the neon-lit blur, a rumor travels faster than sound, faster than light. Someone is selling time. Not the minutes and seconds in a watch, not the hours on a schedule, but time itself. A market of moments, a ledger of possibilities, a black market loom that can weave futures and unravel pasts with equal ease. The chronal lattice underneath the city shivers at every whisper, because whenever the market hum begins to breathe, reality gains a new seam. The walls between times thin like glass in a heat snap. And the city, our city, is never quite the same after someone takes a breath and steps through. The city has two kinds of people, those who measure time and those who steal it. And neither group can resist the siren call of a device that could bend the clock to your will. In the lower vale, where the river has long ago learned to forget its own course, a figure moves with the smooth certainty of a shadow that remembers every corner in a maze it can't escape. Juno Kest, a time smuggler with more aliases than a city has alleys, navigates the underworld like a veins of light map. Juno wears a coat the color of midnight rain, lined with pockets that hold futures and debts. A necklace of watch gears old silver, heavy hangs at their throat, ticking with a quiet insistence that time is never truly theirs to claim, only borrow. Juno slides through the service gangways behind the market district, where stalls spill over with odd contraband, hourglass sand ground to a powder that makes seconds slip, mechanical birds that chirp in a dialect of minutes and hours, and something that resembles a music box carved from a moonstone slate, its melody altering the rhythm of nearby breath. The city's scent is a memory of ozone and rain, of metal and citrus peel, of things that should not exist and perhaps do. On the other side of the clockwork city, in a tower whose light never fades, the Quantum Police, formerly the Chronal Detection Bureau, keeps watch. Dr. Naira Voss, a quantum detective with a mind like a lattice of light and a gaze that seems to measure not the time, but the truth behind what time means, studies the anomalies that ripple through the city's skin. Naira has hair the color of winter fog and eyes that reflect the labyrinthine structure of a function no one else dares to name. She speaks in equations and human patience in the same breath, counting on the moment when a misstep reveals the hidden gears. Her bureau hums with a pale blue glow, screens brimming with graphs that arc like sunrises over a coastline of data. The city's time shakes again, not violently, but with a patient, almost ceremonial tremor. The sort you feel before you realize you're at the edge of a decision that will rewrite a dozen stories at once. The day begins with a single paradox. The clocks freeze, a moment that lasts far longer than a moment should. And then the city breathes again, as though waking to a truth it would prefer never to admit. People push forward, compelled by the inertia of their own intentions. The bus that arrives with a windless whoosh, the vending machine that dispenses a cup of coffee exactly at the instant you think to reach for it, the elevator that stops 3 floors short of its floor, then, with a sigh, completes the journey. In this city, a second can become a lifetime, and a lifetime a single second. The first collision of the day takes place on a boulevard named in the old tongue as the River Street, though no river runs there anymore. The glassy surface of the street catches a reflection of a sky, the color of burnt copper. And the reflection is not an illusion. It is what happens when a city refuses to fade in the dark and instead learns to cast its shadow forward into the future. A figure in a coat too thin for the chill steps into that imperfect reflection, and feels the weight of a choice too large for a single person to bear. Juno's steps fall into a rhythm that is not a walk, not a run, but something in between, a pace the city itself might adopt if time ever learned to breathe in a different order. Juno's destination is a stall at the edge of the market floor. The kind of place that makes ordinary people pretend they didn't see the obvious, that something very important is happening just out of frame. Across the boulevard, Naira stands on a balcony above the market, the wrists of her sleeves stacked with a heritage of measurement, sensor cuffs, chronal dampers, a field projector that hums with a soft, dangerous song. She watches the crowd as if time itself were a suspect, and everyone around her a potential accomplice. Her voice comes to her through the comms in a tone that sounds like rain on glass, calm, precise, but edged with a storm. She keeps at bay. The moment Price Market, a name no longer spoken in polite circles, though everyone knows it by sight, stirs. The first line of the paradox opens. Juno passes a crate of glass spheres that glow with the color of a dying aurora. Each sphere holds a tiny swirl of fog. The fog is not present, and the present is what the fog leaves behind when you look away. Within that fog, memory hums in the air like a swarm of bees. You could touch it, if you knew what you were touching. The crate is a front for something else. A woman with eyes the color of storm-sleet corners the edge of the stall, and glances toward Juno with a cautious smile that never reaches the eyes. This is Lysa Morrow, known in certain circles as the Widow of Hours, a dealer who trades in moments the public never notices. The seconds you lose in a crowd, the minutes you squander on trains that never arrive, the hours you burn away in a life you think you want, but can't remember after Lysa's smile is a trap, a lure, a whispered invitation. Come closer, and I will show you something you did not know you wanted until you saw it. Juno's instinct is to pull away, to vanish into the maze of stalls, to vanish into the city's pulse. But there's a tether in the chest, a memory that sits there like a weight. The tether is drawn taut by the device in Juno's coat pocket, a thing that should not exist in a public place, and yet somehow seems almost at home here. The device is the Daon loom, a chronal loom that can weave or unweave time's tapestry in a way that makes a person wonder if the loom is sewing someone's life together or just cutting its threads. Lysa tilts her head. Her voice slides through the market air, a velvet blade in a velvet glove. You're early, Juno, or perhaps you're always late to your own fate. Either way, you're on the clock. Juno does not answer at first. The air tightens, the clock hands on a distant tower spin backward for the space of a breath. The stall's glow wobbles as a second hand, an artifact caught in the wrong corridor of time, pauses, then resumes with a soft sigh. The moment feels watched. Then, with a courage bought through years of living in the gaps between times, Juno asks, "What do you want, Lysa? Why are you in my path today?" Lysa's smile tilts into something honest and dangerous. I want you to understand what you carry and what you're about to unleash. There are things meant to be kept asleep, and there are people who wake them up for sport. The loom is one of those things. Behind Lysa, a crowd of curious faces gathers, drawn by the scent of risk and rumor. The morning sun glances off 1,000 glass fragments. A waiter's tray clatters in a nearby cafe, as if time itself cannot decide whether to pause for a moment of courtesy or careen into a chase. Juno's fingers tighten around the Aeon loom, which is smaller than it looks, in the market's curious glow, a blackened egg of sorts, with runes etched along its curve that shimmer faintly when touched by a hand that knows how to coax time into behaving. Juno has learned to keep a distance between intention and consequence, to measure the weight of a choice by the ache it leaves in the chest after the word is spoken. Yet the loom's hum is a kind of gravity, pulling them toward a decision that feels inevitable. You know, I didn't come here to haggle, Juno says, voice low, measured, careful. I came to finish a deal we started months ago, one that can end this city's love affair with time, or give it a new history to live under. Lysa steps closer, and the air between them thrums. A new history is a dangerous thing, she says softly. It's easy to tell yourself you're rewriting your life when you're really writing someone else's death. You've seen that, haven't you, Juno? You've watched a man you loved become a memory someone else can curate. Juno's eyes flicker, a moment of raw vulnerability crossing a face, used to hiding behind a razor-edged smile. The memory she speaks of is not of a lover, but of a responsibility long ignored, a debt owed to a city that once gave them a place to hide when time itself turned into a weapon. Naira's presence suddenly enters the scene, like a deliberate intrusion of a future into the past. Her steps carry a quiet certainty, the sort of confidence earned through years of watching outcomes reveal themselves before the numbers even know they exist. She approaches from the other side of the market, stepping around stalls that close suddenly when the light flickers, as if a door in time has closed in a wall that never existed. Juno Kest, Naira says, her voice warm with a professional calm and a hint of steel under it. Lysa Morrow, you both know what this is, even if you pretend you don't. The Aeon Loom is not a toy. It is a tool. It is a weapon. It will do what you tell it to do, only until the moment you realize you gave it a life it can run with. Lysa's eyebrow arches as if to say, isn't that the point? Detective Naira, Juno replies with an edge of respect that belongs more to those who survive on tightrope decisions than those who lecture in libraries. We know each other's reputations, perhaps too well to trust them, but we know what the loom can do, and we know what can happen if it falls into the wrong hands. Naira tilts her head, a moment of quiet calculation. What happens is not only your hands, she says. What happens is the city's fate. You know this, Juno. You know the price you're about to pay. The market you're about to open has an entrance you cannot close. The crowd begins to edge away, not frightened exactly, but not wanting to be in the line of fire when a truth arrives and refuses to leave. The market's neon glow dims, as if someone cut a filament in a circuit. The loom's runes bright and dim in the glassy light, like a heartbeat that refuses to slow. Lysa looks between Juno and Naira. The tension between them, a current thick enough to feel. In a voice that could be mistaken for a whisper of wind through the city's arteries, she says, if you're both going to play it as a choice, you're choosing to stay alive long enough to watch the consequences. And if you intend to do the right thing, you'll have to live with the mistakes you didn't prevent. Juno meets Naira's gaze and sees in the detective's eyes a mirror of their own fear. The fear that this loom could be used to solve the wrong problem or to fix a past that never truly belonged to anyone. The fear that in trying to save the city, they might erase themselves from the city entirely. That is the moment when the siren song of choice becomes a full-blown crisis. The city's heart pounds in a way that sounds almost like the bass of a song, the kind of music that foretells a revolution of time. A ripple travels through the air, a finger of frost that travels across the street and crosses the market's boundary lines, bending the edges of reality for a breath. And then the paradox erupts. The Aeon Loom hums louder, as if waking from a long sleep. The runes along its curve flare into bright vermilion, and a thread of light unspools from the loom toward the ground, like a strand of honeyed light waking the street's very stones. The crowd gasps as the thread touches a passerby, and in a blink, the passerby's past unravels. A memory of a father's hand or a mother's lullaby flickers for a moment and vanishes, leaving a hollow sigh behind. The loom is not simply a device that can be turned on and off. It is a living mechanism that chooses its own rhythm. It chooses what to fix, what to break, whom to save, and whom to sever. And it begins to choose in a way that makes Naira feel each thread of possibility snapping in her own chest. The city itself seems to tilt. The river street's cobbles glow with a feverish blue. The air tastes electric, a copper tang that many are too young to recognize, but which older citizens swear by, the taste of a city that is about to remember itself in a way it never has before. Buildings stagger, fronts and faces of glass shifting into new alignments, as if the skyline itself is learning to walk again. The paradox is no longer a footnote, Naira says to Juno, who is watching with a mixture of awe and dread. It's a tidal wave, we can ride it. Or it can swallow us. Juno's voice lowers, a whisper that could be mistaken for a breath of wind among the market's chatter. Then, ride the wave we must, but we don't do it by destroying the loom. We do it by combining it with something the city holds dear, its memory, its truth, its ability to choose. Lysa steps back, the loom's glow reflecting in her eyes. She realizes, perhaps for the first time with a thread of understanding, that her own life has always been a stroke of luck on someone else's canvas. Time thieves are not just criminals, they are curators who select which moments deserve to live and which deserve to fade away. She has played both sides, always with a smile that hid the consequences of her choices. The loom is a weapon, she says again, almost to herself. A weapon that can erase a life as easily as it can erase a mistake. But there is a cost to using it. There is always a cost, and the bill arrives not at the end of the day, but at the moment you realize you spent someone else's future to save your own. The conversation is interrupted by a sudden, explosive crack of time. The street's center splits, a fault line of time, a clean wound in the air through which a different era peaks, a future version of the city, perhaps, stepping through as if walking along a road that does not exist in the current timeline. Buildings that should be here are not. People who will be in 10 years' time are already here, older or younger, by the weight of decisions not yet made. Each new face is a possible version of someone you know, the future self of a child you will never meet, the past self of a grandmother who has not yet learned to laugh the way she did Naira's. Hand darts to her belt, hitting the dampers, the protective field that keeps the city's distortions from ripping the breath from the crowd. Juno closes their eyes for a fraction of a second, a magician in a story who knows the trick depends on a mistake to work. We aren't going to win by fighting with the loom, Juno says, voice steadier than it feels. We win by feeding it the right kind of paradox, the paradox of choice. We must offer it a different narrative with a greater value than the one it seems prepared to enforce. Naira nods once, decisively. There is one option that could contain the paradox without letting it consume the city, she says, turning toward the loom, toward the thread it is currently weaving into the air. But it requires a sacrifice, the kind nobody wants to accept, the kind that changes every life touched by the city. Lysa swallows, the market's neon light reflecting the tremor in her lip. Speak, she says to Naira, and the word lands like a bead of glass, sharp but perfectly formed. The city's memory is not just a history of pain and glory, Naira continues. The memory is a map. Time is a geography, and we, Juno, you, me, we are the cartographers who misplace borders and redraw coastlines. If we fuse the loom's paradox with a single deliberate action that preserves the city's future while acknowledging its past, we might anchor this moment so it doesn't become the rupture the loom is trying to force. We need a new timeline that is not about erasure, but about recognition. Juno's breath catches. Recognition is a delicate instrument, and this is the moment to play it with precision. The three stand in a triangle of purpose, each of them testing the water with a fingertip. The market around them holds its breath. What is this sacrifice? Juno asks. The words are almost shy, a confession that they never expected to utter. The price is always too high, and no one wants to name it. Naira's answer is unwavering. Time itself has a currency, and today it demands a repayment that will be the hardest to bear. The loom is not the problem. The problem is the belief that the city's citizens, our citizens, are disposable in the face of a problem that seems too big to bear. If we finish this, we must be willing to lose something irreplaceable, the certainty that our choices do not cost us our own lives. The third party, Lysa, steps forward with a cautious, almost brave resolve. If we do this, she says slowly, we are choosing to become the guardians of a new timeline, not a dictatorship of time, not a benevolent tyrant, but a shared memory that belongs to everyone. If a single person dies to make this possible, are we ready to bear that burden? Do we deserve to bear it? In that moment, the city's breath grows shallow between two heartbeats, and the air thickens with the scent of rain and ozone and something more primal, the possibility that time is not a line to walk, but a room to live in together. Juno holds the loom closer, the glow warming the skin of their palm. The runes on its curve are alive now, dancing in a language that exists somewhere between algebra and weather, between memory and prophecy. They feel the weight of the decision in their bones, the idea that to save the city is to condemn parts of themselves to a different fate, perhaps a fate they cannot bear. The choice lands in the space between them, like a coin flipped into the abyss. Naira's voice is soft but clear, the way a bell rings when gravity shifts, just enough to rearrange the world's axis. We can seal the paradox here, on this street, with this loom, by invoking a compromise, a timeline where the city remembers what it did not know and forgives what it did not want to know, and in doing so returns to a cadence that allows life to continue. Lysa steps closer, the loom's glow reflecting in her eyes, a mirror of the decision that glistens within her. And who will be the guardians of this new cadence? She asks, not to trap, but to insist on accountability. Juno lowers the loom slightly, the air around them cooling as if time itself were cooling around a flame that refuses to be snuffed. We all are, Juno says. We all will be. The city is not a thing to be controlled by a single hand or a single mind, but a living organism that breathes in the community of its people. If we are to keep this city from becoming a museum of its own mistakes, we need a pact. Every citizen a steward of time, every decision a shared burden. Naira steps forward, a rare smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, a scientist's smile that has learned to trust the unknown, not by denying it, but by offering it the dignity of evidence. Then we test the boundary, she says. We will influence the loom to weave a new thread that binds the paradox to a common good, justice, memory, and the possibility of forgiveness. Show me, Lysa whispers, almost in awe, as though she has glimpsed the world's true shape for a moment, and found it more terrifying and beautiful than anything she has ever known. The three of them form a triangular stance around the loom. A symbol, not of control, but of collaboration, is drawn in the air by their combined will, a line that links them, an unbroken circle, drawn by three hands at once. The market's neon flickers, the ground shakes with a gentle tremor that seems to originate in the center of each person's chest, and the loom's humming descends into a steady, hopeful tone. Like a heartbeat that knows it may survive, the paradox responds to their pact like a stubborn animal that has learned to trust the voice of its own handlers. It lingers for a breath, a moment of suspended gravity, then releases its tightening grip on the city. A thread of light that had unspooled from the loom begins to retract, coiling back into its cradle as if winding a clock that been wandered too far from its home. The street's edge glows, a pale afterglow that tints the faces of the crowd with the same color as dawn in a city that learned how to wake up inside a memory. Time resumes its gentle dance, not the rigid, bureaucratic march of minutes and hours, but a rhythm the city can hear again, the rhythm of life as it happens, imperfect and bright, stubborn and fragile, but alive. The market exhaled. A man's umbrella opens against the wind and reveals a face that seems blue with relief, or perhaps with awe. A child laughs from somewhere behind the crowd, a sound not heard in a long time, and the sound becomes the city's new punctuation, the sentence-ending note that makes the moment feel whole. Juno lowers the aeon loom and tucks it back into their coat. It is evidence of something too dangerous to be kept out in the light, but also something that must be carried with care in order to be used with intention. Naira's gaze shifts toward the horizon, where the city's silhouette is a jagged line of possibility. She sees not only what is, but what could be, a future in which the city's clocks are honest and their people are awake to what each tick of the moment costs and what it gifts. She pauses, chooses, as a scientist must, to accept a responsibility that has become personal in a way that cannot be easily dismissed. Let us return to the office, she says, turning toward the tower that rises above the market's chaos like a beacon and a warning. There are more clocks to harmonize, more stories to repair, and a city that needs to be reminded that time belongs to everyone. Juno glances toward the loom's cradle, a glint of something unsaid, lighting their eyes. The sense that this victory is not victory at all, unless it changes the patterns of their own lives as much as it changes the city's. The weave of their past remains a raw ache that will not simply vanish with a policy or a smile. The loon's danger remains a memory that might come calling again in a form not yet imagined. They begin to move as a trio, not because they have become allies in the simplest sense, but because they have learned that a single person cannot guard time. It requires a cohort, a council, and most of all, a shared memory that refuses to let the city forget what it almost became and what, in a moment of courage, it decided not to become. The crowd parts with a quiet respect earned through witness. People in the market glint with the ache of near disaster, but they also carry something else, a sense of agency, perhaps for the first time in a generation. A belief that their own choices matter in the theater of time wrinkles. The day does not end with a bang. It ends with a consensus and a plan. Naira will return to the Chronal Detection Bureau to codify the event into a set of guidelines that could be taught to every citizen who wants to travel time's edges without tearing the fabric of tomorrow. Juno will slip back into the shadows of the underworld not as a criminal, but as a guardian who knows when to vanish and when to stand. A person whose life is a map of every time they have ever wanted to become someone else and found the courage to become themselves instead. Lysa will be given a role as a broker of futures, who negotiates not money, but memory, the price of a choice paid in dignity, not debt. The city exhale is audible now, a collective sigh of relief that the moment has passed without collapse. The relief is tempered by a residue of anxiety, the kind that remains after a door has opened just enough to reveal a corridor one did not know existed. Somewhere in the city, in a memory that doesn't belong to any one person, a future version of a child exists, looking backward as if from a window that is only half constructed. Somewhere else, a ripple in the chronal field lingers, a reminder that every choice has a consequence that meets you again on a later page of your life's book. And in the quiet that follows, the city learns something new about itself. It is not merely a place where time can be spent, but a place where time can be chosen, prepared for, and finally understood, not as a force to be mastered, but as a shared space in which every breath matters and every heartbeat is a vote for what kind of world we will become when the clocks finally agree to tell the truth about themselves. As the trio descends toward the tower, the city's glow settles into a steady, patient hum. It is not a cure, not a solution that ends all problems. There are always more clocks to fix and more futures to weigh, but it is something near to a promise. Promise that, for as long as people are willing to stand together on the brink of what is possible and what is dangerous, time will not be allowed to become a weapon in the hands of a few cunning players. Time will belong to those who choose to share it. The day ends as the light sinks into the glass sky, and night unfolds its own careful, glittering map. The chronal winds settle into a rhythm known only to those who have learned to listen to the city's breath beneath every surface. The markets close with a sigh, and the neon signs dim to a soft, hopeful glow. In a rooftop garden that overlooks the city's heartbeat, Naira, Juno, and Lysa stand in a quiet triangle of fellowship, their breaths steady, their bodies tired, their minds alive with possibilities. Naira breaks the settled quiet with a calm, almost wistful remark. Time is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a story to be carried, a memory to be learned from, a future to be built with honesty. Juno nods, a small, almost shy smile crossing their face. Then let us be careful with the stories we tell and the futures we craft. If we can do that, if we can make room for one another, to be both guardian and citizen, perhaps the city might learn to live in a gentler, braver time. Lysa, the broker of moments, offers a quiet, almost tender word in return. If the loom ever calls again, and it will, we will answer not with bravado, but with responsibility. We owe that to those who cannot choose the time for themselves, the ones who are not awake to the danger until the danger is already near. And so the night gathers around them, a velvet cloak with star sparkles in its weave. The clock towers somewhere in the distance click out a rhythm that sounds like a lullaby whispered to the world by a mother who has learned that time cannot be controlled, but can be loved. The city sleeps, or pretends to sleep, while its future breathes gently beneath the surface, like a sleeping giant who knows that the world is changing, and the giant chooses not to fight the change, but to invite it in, to guide it, to shape it into something more humane, something more fair, something that makes room for every heartbeat. If you squint, you can see the lines where time used to bend, and the lines where time now grows straighter. If you listen closely, you can hear the soft rustle of pages being turned in the city's large, unwritten novel, the future taking a breath between chapters and deciding what the next page will hold. In the end, the city doesn't forget that day. It doesn't pretend it never happened, as some places might. It remembers that there was a choice, and that a small group of people made a decision not to hoard time, but to guard it together. And if the memory of that choice stays with the city long enough, perhaps it will keep teaching the new generations how to live with time, how to accept that their own futures are not guaranteed, but they are earned by the hard, patient work of choosing, again and again, to be worthy of the time that remains. The river of hours moves on, a slow, determined current that threads through every street and every heart. The clocks keep their watchful silence. But their silence is not empty. It is a promise, a vow, a chorus that time will, in due course, bend toward mercy if people bend with it, together, one decision at a time. If the reader enjoyed the dance of paradox and memory, if the city's glow and its citizens' courage stirred something within them, then perhaps the story will continue in another form, another night, on another street where time dares to dream again. And should that dawn come, may the clocks be honest, and may the people be ready to tell their truths when the moment calls for them to stand in the light and choose again. The city rests, and in that quiet, a line of rumor travels down the back alleys, a soft echo of a possibility, that the loon's song is not finished, that the moment's peace is only a quiet expiration of a breath before a larger storm or a softer dawn, that a new chapter has not begun so much as a new decision to listen, to trust, to share, and to stand together against the echo of a future that would laugh at their fear rather than face it with them. Reality, for now, holds. The town remains a border town between order and chaos, a place where every citizen knows that time is not a possession, but a labor, one that binds and breaks, promises and costs, sustains and devastates, and that every day in every street, a choice is available to those who would defend a world that makes time worth living in. The night thickens, and the city's clocks settle into a patient, dignified rhythm. If you listen to the wind that brushes across the roofs and the glass, you might hear a faint turning of gears, the soft turning of a page being written, the birth of a new line that will become the city's next legend. And perhaps this legend will tell future readers that there was a night when time itself hesitated and a few brave souls refused to let fear become the truth. They chose to face the wobble in time with their heads held high, to carry its burden, not for glory, but for the chance to give tomorrow a chance to be better than today. In the end, the city forgives. It does not forget, but it forgives. And forgiveness, in this fragile, luminous place, becomes a weapon in its own right, a quiet instrument that keeps hope from dissolving into the shadows when the next alarm bell rings, and the next choice must be made. Again, by those who still believe that time belongs to everyone, and that everyone deserves a chance to tell the story of their life, in a world where every heartbeat can count. The dawn comes softly, a pale green light that leaks through the glass, painting the city in a fresh, hopeful shade. The clocks, restored to a steady, honest pace, begin to tick again with a conscience. Each tick a reminder that even when time tests the will, human beings can decide to be larger than their fear, to be more generous than their grudge, to be brave enough to share what they know of time with one another. And somewhere, in the quiet heart of the city, 3 people find a fragile peace, that they did not choose time over people, or people over time. They chose to weave them together, to build a new rhythm, where life and memory can coexist with the truth of what happened, and the courage to ensure it never happens again in exactly the same way. A rhythm, a hope, a new time that belongs to all of them. A gentle echo travels down the avenues, the sign of something, perhaps a promise, that the city will keep working, keep trying, keep choosing. The work is never done, the risk never gone, but the decision to stand together has become a living thing, a bright ember meant to guide them through the nights when time itself wavers, and the choice to do the right thing becomes the only thing worth doing at all. The city continues, as it always has, and will continue to do, with a steady heartbeat that seems to say, in a voice older than clocks, "We are here. We are awake. We will choose again tomorrow, if we must, to make not just time, but life, worth the struggle." The work endures, and the end of the working. That is something the dawn will decide when it comes again, with the soft, certain light that has learned how to forgive the missteps of yesterday and tell a better story of tomorrow. And if a final thought must be offered, it is this. The story is not over because the city has found its rhythm again. It is only beginning. The clocks will tick, the markets will trade, and somewhere in the weave of the city's memory lies a plan. The plan to protect time for everyone, and to demand from time the responsibility to be fair. If this is the price of keeping the world from slipping away into chaos, then perhaps the citizens of this city will pay it, again and again, because the alternative is unthinkable. A world in which no one remembers the moment when time chose to listen, and the moment when people chose to answer with courage.